Hello and welcome to a brand new series in which we examine the lives of the rich and the famous. Tonight we kick off by asking star athlete Fatima Whitbread, is this your life? From grim childhood to glittering world stardom, the life story of Fatima Whitbread shows a single-minded desire to be the best and to shrug off a succession of personal tragedies that for most would have been too much to bear. She smashed world records, and in her finest hour, she won Britain's only gold medal in the World Championships in Rome. Yet even at her peak, her career has been dogged by controversy. Ladies and gentlemen, Fatima Whitbread. Welcome. Good to see you. This is the famous javelin. Fatima, thanks for joining us. Well, of course, we know you best through all the triumphs that we see on the television screen, but life hasn't always been good for you. You were discovered alone in a council flat at 3 months old. Why were you abandoned?
Abandoned? Well, I wouldn't know as a baby. I was left there, some would say, to die. And I was fortunate that I had a good neighbour at the time, because they reported a crying baby in the flat next door and hadn't witnessed anybody coming to the flat in quite some time. So they rang the police, and the police came along and banged the door down and they rescued the baby, which was myself.
You'd been there for 3 days?
Yes, 2-3 days.
You were dehydrating
badly and...
Almost died?
Yes, and only recently I heard on the news that a young baby had died from dehydration, and I thank my lucky stars that wasn't me.
Well, when you were 5, you were moved to 55 Gatehope Drive in Essex. And in your autobiography, you said this: they didn't give us enough affection and they didn't give us enough to eat.
That's right.
Tired of beans, beans, beans. 1 tin of beans for 7 children. The ladies often had to purchase food with their own money because there wasn't enough food in the house to make a meal. Sounds a bit like Oliver Twist.
It wasn't unlike it, actually, and there were several children in that home, and indeed most of the meal times were spent either baked beans on toast, which you had plenty of toast with several beans with a bit of juice, or jam butty sandwiches.
It doesn't make you think that maybe you exaggerated how bad it was in the home?
No.
It still, in your memory, was a bad time?
For me, that's my experience.
I'm interested in your recollection of the time in that home, because we spoke to Verley Pillay. She was in care at Gatehope Drive just at the same time as you. You haven't seen her since, but she told us this.
I was happy at 55 Gatehope Drive, and I can remember when it was fireworks night, we had a great big fireworks in the garden with and a bonfire, and Auntie Elizabeth used to make us jacket potatoes and hot dogs and hamburgers. I did like it at the children's home there, because I'd been in a home before that one and I didn't like it, so coming to live at Gatehope Drive was more cosier and I got more attention there.
Why do you think your memories are different from that?
Well, if I recall with Verley, she was...
She was a friend of yours?
A friend of mine, that's right.
For quite a number of years?
That's right. For one, I never really got on with the house parents. One of the children at the home came in, started playing up, just like normal children do. It was reported back to the uncle, and we all had to line up in a room. It was rather being interrogated by the Gestapo, and always reminds me of Hitler. And for me, being that much older and more outspoken, I guess I wasn't wanted in the home because I unsettled, you know, the routine of which made things easier for them to run.
Well, you did get through the home, and you even went on from the brownies to the girl guides. But you weren't always a happy part of that team either. We spoke to Olive Jones. She was your guide leader. She told us this.
When the lieutenant got married, we always used to have a guard of honour with the guides. Fatima turned out of uniform, naturally the only one. She got a wigging from the lieutenant, who stood there in her bridal gear and said to her, "You've let me down, Fatima. You should be wearing uniform like the rest."
Well, you chose a red sweater, which made you stand out when they were all in uniform. Do you think that was in some way also an attempt to grab attention, that you felt different and wanted to be seen differently?
Well, I guess any child that's lived in the sort of life that I was living, to a certain extent, would be, you know, a bit outspoken at times, a survivor.
From time to time at Gatehope Drive, your natural mother would re-enter your life. But there were never the reunions that you must have been hoping for. Indeed, one time we're told she paid you £50 and dumped you at the bus stop rather than spend a weekend with you. Tell us about that incident.
Well, I can laugh at that now, but at the
Couldn't have
time
been
it was a very...
laughable at the time.
Yeah, it was a very hurtful thing because I'd fought very hard against going back. The social services thought it would be a very good idea that I go home with this woman I never knew. I didn't speak the language, and...
This was your natural mother, who came from...
She's Turkish Cypriot. And so I decided, OK, well, I'll go. But they were jabbering in Turkish, and I couldn't understand a head or tail of it. And when I got to the end of the road and we approached the bus stop, I was poked in the shoulder and given 10 pence and sent home. You know, we don't want you.
Well, another time you did go and stay with your mother. This turned into a nightmare. You were raped by her boyfriend. We spoke to Ray Pete, a carer at the Gatehope Drive home. She told us this.
Fatima told me she'd been raped. But at first, when she came home, she wouldn't tell me. She said, Aunt, if I tell you something, she said, can you keep it to yourself? And I said, well, I can't if it's important. I have to report it. And she said, well, I'm not going to tell you then. So she went upstairs and had a bath, and she came down, and she sat on the kitchen table, and she told me. And I had to report it.
Was that terrible incident that happened in your mother's home when you were on holiday with her? Was that the final...
Holiday. Some holiday.
Yeah, some holiday. Was that the final break with your mother?
I never really had a bond, so there couldn't have been a break, Andrew. From the word say go, when we walked in the front door of her flat, it was get in the kitchen and clean the stove, and when you've done that, scrub the floor.
You don't consider your natural mother your mother?
Biological one, yes, but not a mother as what we know mothers to be.
But in the midst of those dark days, something hopeful happened. We spoke to Olive Jones. She was your guide leader. She told us this.
We took her to our summer camp. She really enjoyed camping. When we got there, she used to always look for anything remotely like a javelin and tent poles with spikes on them, tree branches that were straight. She would get hold of them and throw them. Of course, I had to stop her because they were dangerous. It was dangerous to the other girls. But never did we ever realise that she would one day be using a proper javelin and being a champion.
At that stage, did you have an inkling that sport was going to play a part in your life?
Yes is the answer. And sport for me was my saviour. I wanted to be successful in something that would build my self-confidence and self-esteem. And sport did that for me. And the more successful I became, the more confident I became. And I was quick to learn that I could get myself in a situation where I would be self-financing as well.
Well, at 13, you met the woman who was to adopt you and change your life. Your new mum, Margaret Whitbread, has described her first meeting with you. And she told us this.
The first time I met Fatima,